15分钟后开始，大会邀请您尽速入座。为了尊重大会致辞、贵宾以及会场秩序，请在大会全程当中将您的手机调成震动或是静音模式。另外，大会备有现场同步翻译耳机，如果需要的话，您可以在大会厅的入口旁边那个展览会场向工作人员询问借用。那么频道1的部分是中文，频道2则是英文。各位女士、各位先生，大家早安，大家好，欢迎参加2015亚太开放资料高峰会。今天的会议呢，是由行政院科技汇报办公室指导，由经济部主办， Open Data 联盟协办，并且由台北市电脑工会所执行。那会议将在10分钟后开始，大会邀请您尽速入座。Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the 2015 Asia Pacific Ocean Data Summit. The summit today is directed by Board of Science and Technology, Executive Yuan, organized by Ministry of Economic Affairs, co-organized by Open Data Alliance, managed by Taipei Computer Association. The opening ceremony will begin in 10 minutes. May I invite all of you to take your seats. 为了尊重大会致辞贵宾以及会场的秩序，请在大会全程当中将您的手机调成震动或是静音模式。Out of respect for the speakers and policy of the conference, please adjust your cell phones to vibration or silence mode during the entire conference. 另外，大会备有现场同步翻译耳机，如果需要的话，您可以在展览会场处向工作人员询问借用。频道1为中文，频道2为英文。Please be advised that simultaneous interpretation devices are available at the exhibition hall. Please feel free to have one if you need it at any time. Channel 1 is Chinese, and Channel 2 is English. 去年与前年，我们分别在英国以及韩国签订了 Open Data 相关的国际合作意向书及备忘录。这是过去2年来我们在开放资料领域当中非常重要的国际交流项目。而在持续努力1年后的今天，稍后在现场我们也将进行一项重要的宣布，那就是筹组亚洲开放资料联盟。这也是象征台湾发展 Open Data 与国际交流又再度开启崭新的一页，也邀请与会来宾共同见证。 各位来宾，现在进入会场的是行政院副院长张善政张副院长，请大家鼓掌欢迎。Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the Vice Premier of Executive Yuan, Dr. 张善政。各位女士、各位先生，大家早安，大家好，欢迎参加2015亚太开放资料高峰会。今天的会议是由行政院科技汇报办公室指导，由经济部主办 ，Open Data 联盟协办，并且由台北市电脑工会所执行。Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the 2015 Asia Pacific Ocean Data Summit. The summit today is directed by Board of Science and Technology, Executive Yuan.Organized by Ministry of Economic Affairs, co-organized by Open Data Alliance, managed by Taipei Computer Association. Open Data 为全球发展之重要趋势。英美早在2009年就建制国家政府 Open Data 网站，英国政府更投入了1000万英镑，成立了 Open Data Institute 来推动。而我国于2013年跟进此一潮流，发布政府资料开放网站。并且由经济部工业局推动 Open Data 于各领域应用与发展，希望掌握知识经济核心，提升产业竞争力。如今已经2年来，我们也有相当不错的进展。今天研讨会的举办将标示着下一个进程与目标。Open Data, one of the most significant trends in global development, both in the US and the UK, have established related Open Data website.On a governmental level as early as 2009. British government spent £10 million to start the Open Data Institute of the UK. In order to follow this trend, Taiwanese government pursues this trend and announces the website for open governmental information 2 years ago, which is driven by the Industrial Business Bureau, Ministry of Economic Affairs, and aim to push the developmental and applications of open data in every field with the hope to hold the economic core of knowledge and to raise the industrial competence. And this year, we will be taking another ambitious steps as our goals. 今天有许多贵宾莅临现场，现在先为各位介绍一下出席的专家贵宾们。Now, I would like to acknowledge some guests in the house. 首先介绍行政院副院长张善政张副院长。Vice Premier of Executive Yuan, Dr. 张善政，经济部次长卓世昭卓次长 ，Deputy Minister of Ministry of Economic Affairs, Mr. 卓世昭，经济部工业局副局长吕振华吕副局长 ，Deputy Director General of Industrial Developmental Bureau, Ministry of Economic Affairs。美国纽约普瑞特艺术学院访问助理教授，也是纽约当红的资料科学家 ，Visiting Assistant Professor of Pratt Institute, United States, Dr. Ben Wellington。印尼全球资讯基金会的研究经理 ，Researcher Manager of Open Data Lab Jakarta, World Wide Web Foundation, Indonesia, Dr. Arthur Glenn Mail。菲律宾行政预算管理部 Open Data 推动总监。Data Lead of Open Data Philippines, Department Budget and Management, Philippines, Ms. Jan Carla Gailon. 泰国电子化政府创新总监 Director of Innovation, Electronic Government Agency, Thailand, Ms. Natawan Wakachangkitty. 日本的内阁官房情报通信技术总和战略室参事官补佐Deputy Director of the National Strategy Office of Information and Communications Technology, Japan, Mr. Ryutaro Mori. 韩国情报化振兴院开放资料中心研究员 ，Researcher of Open Data Center, National Information Society Agency, Korea, Ms. Ji Hye Park. 泰国 Change Fusion Social Technology Institute 总监。Deputy Director of Change Fusion Thailand, Mr. Klangkong Vaithaya Khan. Open Data 联盟会长彭启明彭会长 ，Chairman of Open Data Alliance Taiwan, Dr. 彭启明。Welcome all of you. 再次欢迎各位。 现在我们有请经济部次长卓世昭先生上台为我们致开幕词。To begin, ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Economic Affairs, Mr. 卓世昭 to give his opening remarks. 请各位来宾掌声欢迎。
Vice Premier Zhang, Deputy Director General Li, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is indeed my great honor and privilege on behalf of the Ministry of Economic Affairs to welcome all of you to participate in the 2015 Asia Pacific Open Data Summit. We all agree open data is a new global trend to reshape the world economy and the ways of our life. In terms of economy, a research published by McKinsey in 2013 indicates that open data can generate at least US dollar 3.2 trillion US dollars in economic value each year in transportation, education, energy, medical care, consumer products, and finance. In green and smart life, open data not only reduce carbon dioxide emission by 3 billion tons, but also shorten transportation time by 35 hours per person per year. So I would like to share how much Taiwan has done in the open data development and applications. Over 12,000 entries of government data have been released since Taiwan began implementing open data in 2013. My government has encouraged private enterprise and startups to use the data for applications and value-added service by holding competitions, providing loans, and promoting open data usage. So at present, we have inspired 711 ideas for related applications, which have led to 10 startups and collect 313 types of data, including e-tech, which is the highway electronic toll collection system in Taiwan, as well as medication and e-commerce. We have already released 126 types of data needed by private enterprise, and the most recently released e-tech basis is the fruit of our efforts. In addition to government efforts, private sector's participation is also very crucial to open data development. For example, in urgent times, especially after a natural disaster, traditional commercial map making is too slow and unreal to provide aids. So this is when the mobilization capability of online communities is the very clearest. The rapid map drawing ability of OpenStreetMap assists rescue teams after the Nepal earthquake. And another example is the Philippines. The community assists Philippines after Typhoon Haiyan struck the Philippines by marking collapsed building needed help 2 years ago. So a friendly environment for using open data is necessary to encourage the private sector to develop more open data applications. I would like to share an example of friendly environment in Taiwan. We have public transportation data, which is very easy to collect and to sort this data, and also very time consuming. But if someone wanted to develop a transportation app, the developer needs to sort the data once. If there were 100 transportation services, so the data would have to be processed 100 times. This year, we guide a company in building a platform called Easy Traffic to gather together aviation, parking lots, city buses, and MRT data in a unified format to share with APP developers by the end of this year. The integration will make data to be accessed easier so the developers can focus on value-add service to create a better and easier life. And we all know Taiwan is highly engaged in open data international exchange and cooperation with Japan, South Korea, England, and France. Of course, there are great economic, social, and cultural differences between European, American, and Asian countries. And open data will make all the difference become opportunity. This is why we began initiating for the establishment of an Asian Open Data Alliance. We also hope that cooperation through this alliance will further drive another new type of regional economic development. So today is a rare but nice occasion to have so many partners in the open data gather together. I wish today's forum a very success, and once again, thank you for your participation.
谢谢次长的致辞，请次长回座，谢谢。台湾的 Open Data 推动有今日的成效，我想还有一位非常重要的推手，那就是张副院长。让我们掌声欢迎行政院副院长张善政张副院长来为我们说几句话。Let's welcome the Vice Premier of Executive Yuan, Dr. Zhang Shanzhen, to give us a word.
Good morning, distinguished guests from all over the world. If you pardon me, I will use Mandarin for my address because I think all of you have this simultaneous translation aids. 各位来宾，大家早安。我们经济部所次长、工业局吕副局长，还有各位这个开放资料的先进，大家早。这个昨天晚上那个我们工业局就请了我们国外的来的贵宾啊。跟我们国内一些人吃一个晚饭，那在餐桌上面呢，那个我就刚好跟美国的这个客人坐隔壁啊，就聊了一下纽约市推 Open Data 的这个状况。And if you don't mind, I will share some of our conversation last night for this occasion. 这个我们这位客人啊 Ben Wellington， 他在纽约算是非常红的一位，他其实没有拿任何的经费。但是他呢，去专注在纽约市政府开放资料的一些现象跟问题啊，写了很多媒体报道，然后有很大的回响，变成大概是纽约 Open Data 里面当红的榨汁机哈。这个昨天晚上我了解，纽约其实这个开始的时候啊，就定了一个法，要求政府把很多资料要开放出来。那这个法定了以后呢，当然很多机关就配合，就把资料开放出来。开放出来以后啊，其实看到一些现象啊，可能做到的这个程度就是跟法要求的差不多。事后呢，有时候一些更新呢没有去注意，所以这个我们 Ben 他从这个旁边啊，就发挥外界的这个算是这个督促的力量啊，就指出很多问题。我们国内啊，在2012年开始对 Open Data 的时候啊，也曾经讨论过说要不要有一个法来推 Open Data。有一个法当然是说，其实推起来是比较简单，政府要把所有资料开放出来，把这个法讲清楚以后啊，就没事了哈。但是看纽约的经验呢，其实也未必尽然这么理想。其实最重要的是我们政府的手上有资料的这些公务机关、公务同仁啊，主动的意愿要愿意做这件事情，这个其实蛮重要的。那2012年，我记得是在这个10月还是几月啊？行政院院会就通过了，那个时候是国发会还是经济会，我忘了，那个是研考会，对不起，研考会的那个 一个报告案了，说要开始推 Open Data， 那个是我担任政务委员，然后要求在2012年年底啊，开放5项资料。老实说啊，我心里面对5项资料觉得不太够积极啊。那个很多人也有类似的想法，但是后来证明啊，我觉得当年的研考会啊，大概处理我们公务机关这些很多重要的这些计划，很有经验，知道说怎么样去push我们政府的单位做一些事情，不要太用力，又不会都不用力啊。所以就现在回顾起来啊，第一年从10月到12月3个月时间开放5项资料。老实说，外界看起来觉得不够积极，但是老实说啊，我觉得现在回头看呢是合适的啊，必须要给研考会这个 credit。第2年2013年要开放50样资料，这个就挑战就大了啊。然后呢，就看到这个政府机关开放出来的资料，其实有些啊是在充数的啊。那个从第1年不叫第1年了，从这个2012年的3个月到2013年的50样资料啊。我们可以看到说，其实啊，这政府公务机关啊，有点被叫醒了。原来在睡觉被叫醒了，叫醒了以后啊，被人家叫醒，大家就是很不高兴啊，睡得很好，被你叫醒了，不太高兴。到去年到今年呢，其实慢慢的体会到啊，其实公务机关的心态是有在改变的。我想这种人的心态改变啊，不是说总统或是院长讲一句话就可以做到，真的是要慢慢去推。所以相较于这个立法现在回过头来看台湾走的这条路啊，其实我觉得应该是 OK 的。在那个叫 Open Knowledge Foundation 是吧 ？OKFN 啊，这个组织的评比啊，我们台湾的这个 Open Data 今年是吧11名。全世界11名，亚洲是第1名啊。那去年还前年呢，亚洲我们好像不是第1名，好像是不知道第几名，第4名左右啊。那个，所以在最近这1-2年呢，其实我们政府的进步很大。那我讲这个故事是跟各位分享一下哈。那个过去其实我不太知道说国外啊到底有哪些国家立法以后的成效怎么样。不过昨天跟我们国际友人一起话。我要跟各位报告是说，其实我的感觉是说，国际上面有不同的做法，不同的做法有不同的优点跟缺点啊。但是要跟国际上面做一些交流，了解国际上面的这些好坏啊，其实是非常非常有必要的。我想讲这个推动的历程啊，不是在讲说我们公务人员已经改头换面了什么什么的。我们公务人员绝大部分固然是已经改头换面，非常积极在推 Open Data 没有错，但是我觉得其实这个推动历程啊的经验交流其实也蛮重要的。那个我再跟各位报告一下，另外一个观察是什么呢？我们刚刚讲到这个 Open Knowledge Foundation， 然后我们有一个排名11名。昨天晚上我们在吃饭的时候也讲到，我们台湾这11名到底好还不好，或者说这个排名啊，到底这个准不准、公不公平啊？那昨天晚上也有国外的客人提到说，其实啊。这个排名看起来啊，很大的比重是放在说开放多少资料，但是开放的资料的这个 impact 这个影响啊，其实好像没有在这个评比里面，是不是这样子？我不知道，我不太清楚 OKFN 的这个评比的这个比重啊。但是昨天晚上吃饭期间呢，有人提到说，其实啊，更应该去注意说开放资料以后啊，这资料产生的 impact 是什么啊？那个我觉得蛮同意的哈。那昨天晚上也甚至提到说，其实啊，现在这个 OKFN 这个评比也不是国际标准啊。如果说大家有志一同的话，也可以设计另外一些指标啊，我们也可以做自己的评比啊，大概是这样子。所以越讲也讲到我们等一下一个很重要的一个宣示啊，是说我们今天这个 summit 其实要带动的哈，是我们亚洲啊，大家要准备成立一个，那个要成立一个联盟是吧？啊，今天大概就是这个意思啊。我们看看欧美哈 ，Open Data 的动力是什么？请问教各位，是 Internet 发达的国家，然后开始呢，上面的这资讯越来越普及，而且这些资讯普及了以后啊，希望有一些开放政府的效果，希望有一些刺激经济的效果。亚洲会不会这个样子呢？我不以为然。 亚洲最大的 Internet 的这个国家在我们对岸，他大概不会去推 Open Data 很用力了。这个我觉得亚洲将来 Internet 发展会跟欧美不一样，是因为我们隔壁老大哥在 Open 这一块，我想他不会特别用力。那这样的话我们就不能期待说亚洲国家用 Internet 的这个动力来驱动 Open Data。我觉得亚洲国家推 Open Data 大概短期内不要去寄望我们隔壁的老大哥了，我们要设法去另外找一些我们亚洲国家自己的一些动力跟这个特色所以我想今天这个Summit 跟等一下我们的一个宣誓大概就是要成立一个亚洲的一个 Open Data 的一个叫做联盟也好，叫做什么也好那这个联盟我刚才已经各位讲了说，其实从昨天晚上我体会到说，不同国家的推动历程的经验有交流的必要。将来呢，我们 Open Data 这个各个国家的评比是不是只有一套 OKFN 呢？亚洲国家有没有一些自己的特色呢？我觉得也有一些联盟的必要。那甚至等一下有一个颁奖，这个颁奖也是我昨天才知道说，我们跟泰国在多久以前呢？1个礼拜是吧？1个礼拜以前弄了一个 Hackathon。这 Hackathon我刚刚在外面进来前看了一下 Hackathon 的结果，我们台湾跟泰国的这个得奖的这个应用都不错。我也跟各位特别报告我觉得当初在 Open Data 开放推动的时候2个目标嘛，一个就是要开放政府的所有资讯尽量让民间知道，一个是要刺激这个 data 可以给产业所用，有一些经济产值。但是我觉得这个开放社群跳进来用草根社群的力量把这个 Open Data 做进一步的诠释我必须是说，当初我们2个主轴并没有想到的。以最近台北市政府这个先前这个8仙尘爆最近的台风来看其实政府要把很多资料做 real time 几乎即时的应用，老实说是来不及的。政府有些招标程序什么来不及，这个时候社群可以进来做很大的这个协助。我自己早年也非常喜欢写软体、写程式，那个时候常常觉得说，好像那个武功无用武之地要是有很多资料可以让我用，我可以写很多程式。我想这个 Open 社群的出发点无非是这个样子，说很喜欢写软体，又希望写一些软体呢能够有一些价值、应用价值。那这个时候政府的资料如果拿来开放就是一个发挥的空间。那这个 Hackathon基本上就是让我们亚洲，就是让我们社群，然后如果是跨国的话是亚洲这个社群可以有另外一个这个展现能力的空间。所以我想这个联盟有很多层的意义那个今天我特别感谢这个TCA还有我们这个 Open Data Alliance 能够动员我们国内政府以外的力量让我们 Open Data 过去几年能够展现到今天的成果。当然政府愿意把资料开放出来，这事情已经不用讲了那当然另外呢，让我们 Open Data 有特色就是我们这个社群最近不能说好几年，但是最近一阵子这种积极的表现，从政府预算这资料的呈现到最近我刚刚讲这些灾变最讲究的是时效，能够很快的把东西做出来我觉得在都显示说 Open Data 其实会有很多层面的效益，有这个政治开放的效益，有经济发展的效益，也有社会这种公益的效益都在展现。所以我相信今天我们这个 Summit 加上我们等一下要成立的这个亚洲的这个所谓联盟一定会让我们台湾加上我们亚洲的好几个这个国家，在这个国际的这个 Open Data 的这种台面上有更进一步的表现。我们对未来拭目以待。谢谢大家。
谢谢副院长的致辞。那我们请副院长稍作留步，在这边稍微等一下。那诚如刚刚副院长所提到的 OKFN 的部分，我们现场得到最新的消息，我们台湾从11名到现在已经提升到第9名了。好。那么，就像刚刚院长讲的，我们今天呢将踏出更积极的一步，也就是筹组亚洲开放资料联盟，启动亚洲 Open Data 的区域合作。现在我们就邀请各国代表上台进行亚洲开放资料联盟筹备处的成立仪式。I would like to call upon the following guests to come up to the stage to this launching ceremony of the Asian Open Data Alliance Preparatory Committee. 有请以下贵宾上台。 首先，经济部次长卓世昭卓次长，经济部工业局副局长吕振华吕副局长，行政院科技汇报办公室主任柴慧珍柴主任，Open Data 联盟会长彭启明彭会长，印尼全球资讯基金会研究经理 Research Manager of Open Data Lab Jakarta World Wide Web Foundation Indonesia Dr. Arthur Glenn Mail， 菲律宾行政预算管理部 Open Data 推动总监 Data Lead of Open Data Philippines Department of Budget and Management Philippines Ms. Giancarla Gaulan， 泰国电子化政府局创新总监 Director of Innovation Electronic Government Agency Thailand Ms. Natawang Wakachan Kitty， 日本内阁官方情报通信技术总和战略室参事官辅佐 Deputy Director of the National Strategy Office of Information and Communications Technology Japan Mr. Ryutaro Mori， 韩国情报化振兴院开放资料中心研究员 Researcher of Open Data Center National Information Society Agency Korea Ms. Ji Hyun Park， 以及台北市电脑工会总干事杜全昌杜总干事。我们邀请以上贵宾上台。好，那在这个隆重成立仪式的时刻，请各位为我们鼓掌。也请上台的贵宾，我们往前面正前方的摄影机这边看，这是一个非常历史性的一刻。要捕捉这个镜头的各位来宾，请在这个时候抓紧时机。那我们待会也邀请台上的这几位贵宾稍微留步一下，我们还有第二次的拍照。We would like to invite all the guests on the stage to stay on the stage for a moment. We would like to have our second photo shot, and we'd like to invite the visiting assistant professor of Pratt Institute US, Dr. Ben Wellington, to come up stage and join us. And we would also like to invite the Deputy Director, Thailand Change Fusion Society Technology Institution, Mr. Klangkong Vathayat Khan, to also come up stage. Welcome. Okay, now please look at the photo, the camera shooting, and look into the middle. 大家看着正中央的。那接下来换另外一个姿势，要不要比个赞 ？You can stick out your thumb. Thank you all. Thank you very much for this momentary moment. Thank you. 那我们非常感谢以上的贵宾 ，Thank you all. And I would like to invite 请张副院长、吕副局长 and Ms. Natawang Wakachan to stay on stage for a moment. 我们请张副院长、吕副院长稍微留步，以及 Ms. Wakachan Kitty。好，我们在10月3号与10月4号2天，台湾与泰国共同举办了跨国 Open Data Hackathon。希望借由双方 hackers 的切磋，激荡出不同的创意火花。两国的高手们在18个小时内，针对交通运输、公共卫生、防救灾害，产生出创新解决方案。18小时后，两国的评审选出了优胜队伍。我们现在邀请我们的优胜得奖团队上台。首先欢迎最佳黑客奖 Best Hackers， 台湾方团队 Got You， 泰国方团队 Death Clock， 分别可获得美金550元奖励。那我们现在邀请卓次长一起上台，跟我们一起颁奖，谢谢。另外一个队伍是无敌黑客奖 Invincible Hackers， 台湾方的 I Love Large Data， 以及泰国得奖团队 Moamong， 他们分别可以获得美金850元奖励。那我们一样请贵宾以及我们的得奖者看向我们的相机镜头，让我们掌声恭喜他们。好，谢谢各位得奖者。那我们 请台上的长官们留步。我们除了跨国 Hackathon 之外，今年工业局也办理了 Open Data 创新应用竞赛，来鼓励大家多多运用 Open Data 来改善我们的生活品质以及创新应用服务。接下来是大会指定类开放资料应用组的银奖作品，首先是乐活长青、选举黄页、先知、李长博自己找、Elder 老师爱运动、科技钓鱼台、公车好赚钱、公车广告效益分析平台以及协寻。那我们一样邀请我们的长官为我们颁奖。恭喜以上得奖者，我们一样看向中间的摄影机。好，谢谢，我们再次感谢我们卓次长为我们颁奖，请卓次长稍作留步。紧接着我们要颁发大会指定类开放资料应用组的金奖，作品名称：食安悍将、友善新竹哺乳室 App、Fun Days 旅游规划、竹若峡公益地图 V1.0、爱舒服以及 StockAI.com 投资及经济指标使用指南。再次邀请卓次长为我们颁奖。那我们的得奖者也一样看向中间的相机。好，请各位恭喜以上的得奖者，恭喜以上得奖者。好，我们感谢卓次长为我们颁奖，然后也恭喜我们的得奖者。那次长，我们还有一个奖项，接下来呢是颁发政府及企业指定类经济部多元资料与创新应用组的作品。那么我们得奖作品有金奖简单创业伙伴暨专案媒合平台，银奖的社群 CRM 帮你留住旧客户，找到新客户，以及佳作的就是 I 展览以及市集好好逛。我们恭喜以上的得奖者，一样请得奖者看向我们的摄影机、相机。好，非常恭喜他们。那我们再一次感谢卓次长我们颁奖，谢谢卓次长。次长可以先回座了，谢谢。接下来我们要持续颁发企业指定类内政部 TGOS Map 应用组得奖作品为金奖 Pre-System、银奖JDA 在地仔生态旅游网。现在我们邀请我们的社组单位内政部沈金祥主任为我们进行颁奖，欢迎。好，我们的得奖选手也请看向中间的摄影机以及相机。好，微笑，恭喜他们。好，感谢我们的沈主任，那沈主任可以先回座。我们也恭喜以上的得奖者。继续，我们颁发的是企业指定类天气风险、气候变迁创新应用组，得奖作品为银奖与为才。我们邀请社组单位天气风险公司彭启明总经理为我们进行颁奖。恭喜得奖者。让我们一样看向中间的相机。好，恭喜得奖者，也谢谢彭启明总经理。恭喜以上得奖团队，也谢谢颁奖人。这么多的得奖队伍，让我们感到台湾新创能量的蓬勃发展。以上开幕式到此圆满结束。接下来我们进入到知识性的部分。首先，我们进行主题演讲。演讲题目是创新共筑产业新动力。我们邀请到的主讲贵宾是经济部工业局吕振华副局长，请各位掌声欢迎吕副局长。
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Taiwan and join us in Asia 2015 Asia Pacific Open Data Summit. I'm Richard Liu from the IDB, and as the first keynote speech and the local host, I'm going to introduce how open data is going in Taiwan and the reason why we invite everyone here today. This is the outline of my presentation today. I will begin with the progress of open data in Taiwan and how do we look open data regarding to economy value. Then explain the reason why we should all collaborate together across nations. First, let's take a look at the current status of open data in Taiwan. Okay. Open data, or say open government data, is a very strong global trend. The number of open data portals has increased since UK and the USA first launched their government open data portal in 2009. The colored countries and the regions on the map indicate that those who has their open data portals. Darker color means higher open data readiness in their country. Today, there are already more than 45 nations and 163 regions and the cities with their own open data portals around the world. Of course, Taiwan is one of them. The reason we all love open data is that it creates a lot of value. The most important value may be government transparency and the democratic control, government efficiency, citizen participation. But as in IDB, we may pay more attention on economic value, social value, and business innovation. Okay, next one. Taiwan has deemed herself as one of the most open democratic countries in Asia. We are very proud and determined to embrace open data. The question of open data was never about when, but how. Although we have insisted all at open data, it is not an early easy job. Taiwan is in a few years behind this wave of open data initiatives, and we did a lot of research before we take action. We look back in Taiwan and we realize that to open government data, we must have data and the way for people to access it. Luckily, Taiwan has been good at these two things. First, we have built our e-government for decades, and Taiwan is ranked 17th in 2015 Waseda IAC e-government rankings. And the long operating and the strong e-government infrastructure have generated a lot of data. Second, Taiwan passed law to enforce openness of government information 11 years ago. In February 2013, the Executive Yuan for promoting guidelines for itself and its subsidiary agencies, which stipulated that the data opened by format and permit free usage for value-added application. It surely makes the culture of open data much easier to be accepted by government officials. So, honestly speaking, open data is not just a global trend or a fancy buzzword into Taiwan. It is actually the demand of our society. Our information disclosure law only provides the result of government decision, while the original data and the decision-making process, maybe some of them are remain hidden. These years, there have been a few protests about decisions that Taiwan government made, and we try very hard to communicate with our people and try to convince them it is the best decision what we do. But in the end, we realize that open data is the only and the best way to communicate with our people. So we choose this decision. The role of the government in Taiwan, government is the main force of open data, and each government agency play different roles. On the highest level is the executive yuan, who is in charge of making the national strategy of open data. Vice Premier also attend our conference, so that is good obvious that executive yuan is strongly support this policy. And under executive yuan are two agencies in charge of data supply and the demand and the reuse. On the supply side, the National Development Council, NDC, is the main force of pushing government data to open. It is responsible for open data regulation, data format, stand, API, and the licensing. Mr. Jen Hongwei will have a speech today. And on the other demand side, the IDB, my bureau, take charge of data reuse and the promotion and helps all data users to acquire data and reuse it. Taiwan's National Open Data Portal was launched at April 2013. It began with only 100 database or so. When then launched a reuse promotion project by IDB at November 2013, if you ever notice, there were very few open data reuse promotion projects around the world. Most countries just open and release data combined with some campaign or hackathons. So Vice Premier says that we wake up during this time period, that the slide shows the progress of open data in Taiwan. Since the executive yuan made the policy at the year end of 2012, we soon launched our national open data portal and our promotion project. We relied our enterprise, scientists, communities, and the citizens interested in open data. They soon formed the Open Data Alliance in September 2013. Dr. Pong is the chairman of the ODA. Open Data Alliance is a great platform and it effectively gathered the voice of a private sector that's played a very important role in Taiwan's open data. Our Premier Mao, who took office in December 2014, saw the importance of open data. He soon announced the so-called 3-arrow IT strategies. Some of our enterprise and the government officers doubted before, but now they are sure of the determination and the persistence of our government in open data. As times go by, the database we released and the related application and the services greatly grow up. By the time we are talking, there are more than 13,150 databases already, and the use party is growing correspondingly. This is a global open data index survey. Just Vice Premier also mentioned that we are in the rank 11, and Dr. Peng told us that it moved to number 9. So it's very good result that we have this kind of ranking. And in next page, we also talking about interacting with the world. Since there are a lot of countries who start open data earlier and doing better than Taiwan, we started to interact and try to learn from them. During the past 2 years, we visit a lot of countries and also invite them to Taiwan and showing their experiences with us. This is not government-to-government interaction. Most of them, it's Open Data Alliance who runs as our Open Data ambassador. We have visited Open Data Institute and the UK government in 2014 in May, and I also attend this team delegation. And also, we also interact with our neighbors, including Korea, Thailand, and Japan, and so on. So there are so many countries that I cannot elaborate individually. However, I have to mention that 2015 International Open Data Conference, it is a very important occasion where all friends we visited before show up today and together. There we start a conversation about Asia Open Data Forum, and we might see the matter going on during today's summit. In the second part, I'm going to tell you how do I or say the IDB see opportunity in open data. There are many reports about the economy value of open data. The most famous one could be the report published by McKinsey, who gave us a huge number that exceeds $3 trillion US dollars. Although the number may be debatable, but its survey encourages us and make us wonder how can we dig all the gold from open data. What comes to your mind when you mention Taiwan? The first thing comes to most of them are ICT industry in Taiwan. ICT industry and the produced products are still the major export good of Taiwan. Besides, we see open data is a complement of ICT industry. The data would be useless without exploring, analyzing, and transforming into application and service. As a result, we need a mature ICT environment to process and reuse data in order to develop our service and applications. On the other hand, to run open data, we must have a strong environment to generate data, share data, and provide access to public. Apparently, a strong ICT industry will help all of them happen here in Taiwan. Now we realize that Taiwan's government have good motivations and the benefits for open data, but how to do? We start our promotion project with 5 strategies. We call it VITAL. Y means encourage value-added application and establish models. I means they stimulate business innovation. T means training and provide data science-related training, evaluate technology and licensing issues. A is awareness, and the L is link supply demand. Then it's like a circle that we call vital strategy. Next one, we will see the driving data use step by step. Promotion seems to be easy, but there is a hierarchy in it. We need to figure out what our enterprise and the society need at different levels. Let's begin from the start. Our entire society and the public. As I mentioned earlier, very few people and the enterprise ever heard about open data before. And it seems unlikely for them to start using open data. So first of all, we need to publicize and let everyone knows the new trend called open data and how can it help us. Some enterprises we see the opportunity and the value in open data, but they might not have the skill and the staff who master it. For them, we need to provide trainings and the linking platform for them so that they can do it themselves and hire the right partner to co-work with. For those who know well about open data and how the capability to use it, and they need it motivation. Therefore, we provide a small subsidy and all-around assistance to stimulate them and the motivate them. Upon they develop a new application, services, and new business model, we would promote this successful story and repeat the entire circle. So when you have break time, you can see the competition show for around this meeting. And the achievement of promotion, it has been almost 2 years since we started the promotion project. Our cognition of entire society has raised from 10% to 65%, and the ODA member is from 0 to 357. And the idea and the application, we collect about 714. After 2 years of campaign, this is our result. And also, we are elaborated to reuse case here for the example. The first one is precision agriculture decision-making system, and also the agriculture enterprise decision-making system. Taiwan agriculture industry is facing 2 problems. First one, Taiwan has a lot of natural hazards like typhoon, flood, the earthquake, landslide, and sometimes they come together. This is what we call multi-natural hazards, and it seriously reduces our agricultural production. Second, Taiwan farmers are all small and single enterprise. The average farming land of each farmer is 10,000 square meters only. This makes it very hard to achieve target economy scale. Now, with various kinds of weather, environment, and agriculture open data, EMCT company developed a decision-making system. Each farmer can receive details and grow-in instruction from the system. Next one is that traffic data consolidation application platform. That's TMS technology. TMS technology has been dedicated in promoting Taiwan traffic data service platform and improve the capability of industry, government, and the school. There are 2 problems also faced in traffic demand regarding to public transportation. First is there are just too many different data sets published by different government agencies. It is very hard to collect the diversity of public transportation data. Second problem is that those companies who run public transportation service lack the ability to design and access routes. This project tries to solve these 2 problems at once. It collected and cleanses integrated 920,000 data from different sources and provide them public, and also offer M2M API interface to developers. This project also provides a visualization way for transportation service provider to evaluate their route performance and improve. And this project is still ongoing, but there is already a company import this system. Next one, we are talking about reuse of open data that not fully transform into economy value. Although we have been promoting open data reuse so hard for 2 years, we look back and realize one thing. It actually produced very little economy value. Remember that McKinsey report had mentioned about earlier. Where is the money? we did some study and found that it's a little bit difficult for open data to transfer to economy value. In those 714 open data idea or service development, only less than 10% are business oriented. Most of them are public service oriented, and even some of them have economy value. Usually it is a minor part of it. The last problem is that it's hard to evaluate how much this data benefit your company. And we aim to develop the company value, and we promote it hard, and we surely have achieved some result. So what is wrong? Open data is a good thing, and it has too many good values. Economy value is just one of them, and it's often combined with others. It's hard for you to turn a naturally open public scheme into private profit. Realize that we decide to do two things. The first is to adjust our expectation. Open data is not only about money. The second one is that we need to adjust our strategy to stimulate more and focus more on economy value. So the way to data economy, now we are preparing for this. Ecosystem of data economy. This is the Taiwan ecosystem of data economy made by the IEK of E3. In this ecosystem, we have data supplies and the entire value chain to process, analyze, and make them a product and the service to our customers and the users. Outside the direct value chain is infrastructure provider and the supporting vendors. We made a comprehensive study and try to help our companies to earn money from open data. These conclusions are in the next 2 pages. In order to generate more economy value money from open data, we must seek opportunities. The first opportunity presently it lies within those highly profitable domains like transportation, financing, real estate, traveling, etc. If they are doing data-oriented services or products, then it is highly possible that open data will increase the value of their existing products or even stimulate new products and business models. We already see this happen in financial product and the real estate domain, and we expect to see more. The second opportunity is that the domains that our government has huge data collected. Since collecting data needs a lot of effort, and we are not collecting it for nothing, it must mean a lot of value. We just need to find the right user and the idea. The last two opportunity is to rely our ICT technology. You find that the most valuable part about open data is to help you make decisions. And to make decisions, you need the skill and the technology to analyze data, make forecasts, or you can either develop a proper visualization to help people make decisions. These things might not always lead to economy value in the end, but we do believe we have better chance in there. Another aspect to build support at our weakness, which abstract us from developing economy value. Since our cognition about open data is still low, that is 65% as we mentioned before, we still need to promote it, but with more success story than 2 years ago this time. Also, we need a dedicated organization like ODI that promote open data and has a business model to sustain. Taiwan government does not plan to promote open data reused forever. In the end, it will fall back to make mechanism just like all other countries. However, we still like to see a dedicated organization who operate as an important role and gather the power of our industry. Regarding to the capacity, we are a bit weak in the skill and the knowledge to explore, analyze, reuse data. A data scientist incubation program or facility will definitely help a lot. We already have data science program developed by private sector and the community. The next step will be bring them together and increase the training capacity. So there are so many goals to achieve and the action to take. We merge them into three categories, three major things. First one is guide the application meet the citizen demand and the economy value. Second is that operate data platform to link government and the private data and the supply demand. And the third one is promote training and the development technology by multi-organization. In the prospects, today we invite people from different countries. We expect there are more things we can do together. In the future, government encourages the industry to use open data to create more innovative development and help the ICT industry stronger. Open data make the government and the public and the industry have a win-win solution. So we will keep learning from others and maintain our friendship. This is when I visit ODI in UK, and Mr. Ho also sit over there. And the next one, that is, we are happy to see people join us from every country around the world. And last week, we have Taiwan and the Thailand hackathon. So I have the winner, we have winner, and last year, my boss is here to attend the international conference. And the last one is that how can we work this out? First one is create cooperation and the exchange platform. Second is share successful case and lead the industries. Third one is use cross-country data to solve similar problems. Fourth one is exchange the policy and the practice. And the last one is holding competition to share the technology and the talent. So for my conclusion, data is valuable only when used. We all love open data, and we try to learn more from all over the country and the distinguished guests. Thank you very much. Thank you.
非常感谢吕副局长为我们的精彩演讲。接下来我们要进行的讲题是迎接全球资料商机。我们邀请到的主讲贵宾是美国纽约普瑞特艺术学院访问助理教授 Dr. Ben Wellington. I would like to invite the next speaker up stage, visiting assistant professor of Pratt Institute, Dr. Ben Wellington, to share his expertise and knowledge on taking open data to the next level. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Ben Wellington.
All right, hi. Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I'm so inspired by what I've seen happen here in the last couple of years, and watching the presentation and knowing that all happened in only several years is an inspiration to me, and I'm inspired to be here with all of you. So today I'm going to be talking about open data, but from the view of a citizen. I don't work within government. I don't have an official role with open data in New York. However, I seem to have become the voice of citizens who are interested in open data in New York City. So I'm going to be sharing some stories with you about what that experience has been like for me and what I've learned. I am really a data scientist and studied natural language processing, which is computer science, linguistics mixed with computers and math. And that's not really what I'm using for this, but in general, data science is generally interesting. And so in New York, right around the same time, in 2012, as was mentioned earlier, the mayor of New York City signed into laws the open data laws in New York. And it's interesting because in New York, it was legislation by the legislative branch that caused the data to come out. And that creates a very different dynamic. When you're forced by a law to release something, you might be hesitant. And yet so if the executive branch of government is being forced by the legislative branch of government to do something, there can be tension. And it's maybe not the best way to go about things. Obviously here we've come in from the executive branch and you don't need the legislation because there's so much going on, which has really been inspiring to see. So in 2012, Mayor Bloomberg in New York signed these laws and the open data portal in New York City was created. When he signed the legislation, he had a quote, and he said, "Across city government, agencies use data to develop policy, implement programs, and track performance. Each month, our administration shares more and more of this data with the public at large, catalyzing the creativity, intellect, and enterprising spirit of computer programmers to build tools that help us all improve our lives." So that was the quote that went along with signing the bill. And New York, much like what we saw here, we actually do have competitions every year. In New York, it's called the Big Apps competition. It's been going on for quite a while, and they have a competition who can make the best apps for New York City life. But one thing that always struck me about Mayor Bloomberg's quote was the fact that he said that open data is just about computer programmers. I teach urban planners at the school, and they are not computer programmers. They've never coded before. And yet, if they learn to use a tool like Excel, they can start to use open data to answer questions about the city they live in. And so I think that we have to take a step back sometimes and say open data is not just for computer programmers. I mean, I'm a computer programmer, but let's look at it more broadly and see how all citizens with all different backgrounds might be interested. So I think sometimes people think open data goes to apps and then goes to the public. I think that there's other ways that open data can go to the public, and it can be interesting for policymakers, for nonprofits, for urban planners. The news agencies can start to use open data to tell the stories of what's happening around them. For bloggers, and really anybody who shows an interest. As our tools get better, you will need less programming experience to actually study open data, right? Today, maybe you need some, but as our tools are getting better and better, you don't need to be a programmer anymore to study data. So it's a very, very exciting time for open data. We saw this list earlier. This is the US city version of the same Open Knowledge Foundation rankings. We have lots of cities ranked. New York is number 2 there. And as you can see, this is kind of changing daily because I looked at it a few days ago and Taiwan was 7, and then today it's 9, and then you heard it was 11. So it's obviously being updated as you speak. So tomorrow, look out. I think maybe they're auditing and going through, and so you'll see some movement. But that's an even better picture than we heard, right? And you can go in and for any country, we can look at local cities, and they're actually ranked as well. So what's nice about this is you can find data sets. For example, if you're interested in food safety, you can go down the food safety column and find the data set in the city you're interested in. So this is all available on the Open Knowledge Foundation Open Data Census. So I took all this data and I started to look in New York, and as was said, we're releasing more and more data, and there's data everywhere. And people were saying, well, now what? What do we do with all this data? There's all this data. What's next? And so, I set a personal goal of myself to start a blog. And the blog was called iQuantNY, which was I Quantify New York. And my goal was to go into this data and try to tell the stories hidden within. What can I say about New Yorkers, how we live? What can I say about policy, how government operates? What can we learn just by going through data that maybe is sitting there and is not yet being used? So I started this blog about 1.5 years ago, and things started to move along. Now, before open data, we used to get charts like this. This is a chart from the Taxi and Limousine Commission in New York City. They license all of our taxis, and it tells you how many taxis we have, and how many black cars, how many limousines, and they start to count. Now, if you think about where this chart came from, somebody in a government office thought that this was an interesting chart, which it is, and they went and they did the statistics, and they made a chart, and they released the chart. And that's how, for a very long time, data went to the public, right? It was the decision of the government what types of statistics we should all see. And that's great because they know a lot about things that I may not know. But with open data, we don't just have to rely on what people think we want, but we can start to ask our own questions of any sort if we have the data. So it's a new way to learn about the place we live. So before you would see stuff like this, but I had a question in New York. You know, I was wondering when rush hour is, meaning when is the traffic worst in New York City? Is it in the morning commute? Is it the evening commute? So I started to look at taxi data a little differently. See, all the taxis in New York have GPS recorders, and every taxi tells you the longitude and the latitude of every pickup, and every drop-off, and the time. So with some physics, we can start to learn the speed of every taxi. So if we aggregate the speed of all the taxis in New York City, we can try to get a feeling for the speed of the cars in New York City. So I did that to study when is rush hour in New York City. I learned that at 5 in the morning, very early, is when the cars are fastest in New York City because everybody's asleep. So the cars that's the only time they're fast. But it gets very slow very quickly. And by 8 in the morning, it bottoms out to its slowest speed. And it turns out there's no rush hour in New York. There's just rush day. The whole day is slow. It seems that was kind of interesting. And you wouldn't necessarily know this without being able to analyze the data. And now you know if you need to get to the airport quickly, make sure you set your alarm for 4 in the morning and you can do it. Otherwise, you might be stuck in traffic. An interesting, this is a question. So open data allows people to ask their own questions in new and creative ways, right? So this talk is about my exploration of that, and I'm going to tell you about 3 things. I'm going to tell you about what I've learned as the best practices for release of open data, how we consume it. Then I'm going to talk about best practices for the analysis. So how, if you're interested in data, how do you tell the stories in it? And lastly, I'm going to talk about some of the impact that the data has had in New York City. So we'll start with the release of open data and my experience there. This is a map of cyclist accidents in New York when bicyclists collide with vehicles. So it's not a very fun map, but it's a map that shows where the most collisions are happening. So we have the police reports, and I learned by looking at this map, I live down to the south in Brooklyn, and there's Manhattan, the island in the middle, and you see that on the, on the east side is where most of the accidents are happening, and you see a few other areas. You see this part of Brooklyn called Williamsburg, where there's lots of young people with bicycles, and so there's just a lot more accidents. And you see another avenue. So this coloring, this data just starts to give you a picture, and it's very simple in this software called QGIS, which is free spatial analysis software. You kind of can import it and go to File, Save As, Heat Map. It's very simple to start to tell the stories within. So I wrote about this, but there was something about the data that it came from that was interesting, and that was it came from one of these guys. You know this symbol probably, right? We've all seen. If you're in this room, you shouldn't maybe know this symbol. This is the PDF. In New York, all the collision information was released because by law it had to be released, but it was released in PDF form. So we had hundreds and hundreds of pages of PDFs that look like this, one accident at a time. Each row is an accident, hundreds of pages, and imagine trying to analyze that using a computer. It's not easy. So somebody named John Krause wrote a program that would go on the New York Police Department's website every day. It would look for PDFs, and then it would turn them into text files and save a copy somewhere so people could do analysis. So every day it would automatically change the PDF to text. And suddenly, you could do things with it, right? Because it wasn't locked in a PDF anymore. And it's not just the police data, it's really around the world. You see lots of PDFs in use. This is the budget data in New York City that our legislators are voting on, and they get that via a PDF. So they get this 1,000-page PDF and then have to decide to vote on it. So they can't even analyze the budget that they're voting on because it's in PDF form. And as I looked around on the local website, here I noticed something else. I looked at the police data in Taipei, and it's also all in PDF, not all, but much of the information is in PDF form. So it's universal. This is something that's happening around the world. And it makes, what happens with PDFs is that people have to get the data out, and you're kind of using citizens' time, right? Each person has to do all this time, and so you're not hiding the data, it's out, which is great, but you're just using the time of people who are very passionate. So it's good to take that and maybe make it text. And if you go into the PDFs, by the way, you get these tables, very similar to New York. Very, very similar to New York, right? Big tables, hundreds of pages of PDFs. So that I found in the hotel 2 nights ago when I went and looked, with a little help from Google Translate that helped me. I hope I got this. It says types of crime, so I think I'm in the right place. So data, we want to work as a, best practice. We want it to be machine readable, and this is key. Often in New York, I see maps go up. Like we have a crime map, and the map shows you where crime's happening, but you can't download the data, right? You can't download it. So when you see a map, it's a great opportunity to link to the raw data so people can then do more analysis. There's so much opportunity there. This is a map I did, and it's kind of strange. It's kind of gross too. In New York, we have our sewers, where we flush and things go, and then we have we have the septic system, and then we have the street drainage. So the toilets and the street water all go to the same system, which is fine. It's efficient, but it's not okay when it rains very heavily. When it rains very heavily, the sewers back up, and things get really bad, and the city has to release overflow into the rivers. So this is not a good time to take a swim, and I found data on water quality in New York, and every week they came and measured the levels of what was called fecal coliform, which is a measurement of really how much sewage is in the water. So not very pleasant. But a reality, not the kind of map you'd see on the front of the New York City website, right? But one that was important. So I analyzed for each location in New York how often you'd be able to get in the water without breaking the law. Because there are laws that say if the level's too high, it's illegal to swim. So what % of the time would it be illegal to swim in that part of the water? Now, as you see, the big waterways have smaller circles. That means that they're cleaner. They're less often bad. And as you go inland, things get more dirty. That makes sense because the larger waterways can dilute. And I learned there was one spot in New York behind, called Coney Island Creek, where 94% of samples taken had levels that it would be illegal to swim in the water. And this wasn't necessarily being talked about in New York all the time. It wasn't very common knowledge, but I was striking to see, and open data allows people to start having conversations about that. It's not just the areas that have the most money that can complain about something. There's more equality because we can actually go in and look for ourselves. So I should point out though that data didn't just sit on the open data portal. I had to go find it. And if I were to click on each of these links, you'd get an Excel sheet. And each Excel sheet would have a different heading. And so you have to copy and paste and put it and do all this manipulation just to clean the data, no pun intended, just to clean the data to analyze it. And what we end up is kind of a bit of a mess. So I think that what's great and what I'm seeing here is that data needs to be more easy to find. So it's difficult because agencies have their own data sets. But what I've seen happening here in both the federal, the national data website here, and then I looked at the data.taipei, is that we're starting to bring things together in a centralized way to help people find it. So that's great and so important. This is a map of New York. And what I did is I looked at, we have a bike share program. I know you have U-Bike here. In New York, we have City Bike. And City Bike, when you get an annual membership, you give them your age, your sex, and your credit card number. And you can ride around, but what's neat is it creates a data set of everybody's age and sex who are riding around on the bike share. So I made a map of New York City studying the gender of the riders in each neighborhood to wonder if there were patterns. Are there some neighborhoods with more male and some with more female? And the answer was very much yes. If you look up at the star, that's Times Square. That's Midtown New York City where all the businesses are. And you could see that around that area, 80 to 90% of the riders, 80 to 90% of the riders were male. And if you go down to some of the other areas, like in Brooklyn, it was only about 60% male. So we see, we're studying gender in our city using bike share data. So you never know when you put a data set out how it might be used, but it starts to tell very interesting stories. It's interesting, first if you're trying to find a date, that might be very interesting use, but also just to study gender and how it looks in the city overall. So I was able to do that because the data was geocoded, right? It had latitude and longitude on it. So much of our data is not often, and what happens if you don't add latitude and longitude to your data, you're asking your user to do that. And if you have 10,000 users, they all have to run the same process over and over, you've wasted 10,000 times more effort to code your data than to do it up at front. So I noticed that it was a mix. In New York, it's very much a mix of some happen to be geocoded. I noticed the same thing here. I saw some information on police, on surveillance cameras, and they had addresses, but not latitude and longitude here in Taipei. But I saw other data sets like fire hydrants that did have longitude and latitude. So it's difficult to do this, but it's very worth the effort because you save all the users the effort. I also looked at data on the traffic speeds. I downloaded the speeds around Taipei from these sensors that you mentioned. Now, this was just a snapshot at one point in time in my hotel room. I downloaded it, uploaded it to a website called CartoDB, where you can make interactive graphs. This took only a few minutes because open data allows you to do things like this. But what I wanted to do originally was look at how the traffic changed over the holiday that you had here a few days ago, right? But the problem is there was no history. There's only the current data. Now this is very common. Once again, it's a big problem in New York City where you can find the list of licenses for people who, I guess, liquor licenses, people who can serve alcohol. So you can go on and you can see the current list, but you can't see the history. So only looking at now, it's hard to tell a story, right? We only know what's currently happening. So I would love to see more people take history snapshots. And if you have a data set that's changing, think about how you can store each point in time to study how it changes. And that's going to be a story in itself. It's an important observation. Sometimes that's hard. This data is very big. There's lots of sensors. It's always changing. So maybe you snapshot it every 20 minutes or every hour. But it can be done. We have the same exact situation in New York. So I set up an Amazon server, and it downloads every 5 minutes, and I store it locally for myself. And then now I have a year of history in New York traffic. But I would love everyone to have access to that. So I want to see more cities take that initiative. So think about history and making it accessible. Also, one thing that I was amazed by as I went through the website here was that each data set had an owner with a name and an email address and a phone number, which is not something that we see very often in the United States. And it's great. It's a great thing because it gives you as the consumer a place to go and reach out to. So this was something that I was very, very surprised by, and we'll bring stories back to New York to tell them that they need to do as well as you're doing here, because what happens is sometimes someone puts out a data set and they forget about it. And then there's no one to talk to, there's no one, you find the mistake. When I went through the taxi data, I noticed that some taxis went back in time. They time traveled backwards. So I assume it was a data error or some interesting time travel, but there was no one to ask about it. So this is great that we're seeing this here. So I think data should have an accessible owner is something that I've learned. So those are just some observations from analyzing data, some best practices. And I'll talk about now some stuff I've learned while analyzing. What on the other side, right? That's sort of the data creator, but what about the consumer? What about, and in my case, I guess it's stuff that I've worked on. So I'll go back to this example. And when I wrote about this, it was me learning how to use the software. I hadn't used this particular software before. And I put it on my blog, and then it started to kind of spread around in different media, and it was in The Atlantic, and all these people started to write about this thing, and I thought it was crazy because all I did is go to File, Save As, and then it was all over the different media, and said, what is going on? Why are people so interested? There's so much interest out there in data that when you start to do it and you tell a story, you can do a lot. And what I learned is that so much of it was about storytelling. That you need to be able to, very often in our science classes, we don't necessarily learn about how to tell a story. And we learn how to talk to other scientists. And a lot of the time when you read people doing analysis with data, they're writing with an audience of other people who do analysis with data. And they write about Python, and they write about the downloads. But I decided to change that and write for everybody and learn how to tell a story through data instead of analyze the data so that for other people interested in data. And that creates a much broader audience, right? Think about climate change. If our scientists who do climate change could only tell the story to other climate scientists, we wouldn't get much traction. So communication is so key in storytelling. So I learned some best practices of storytelling that I think make sense. So first of all, one is you want to connect with your audience in some way. And in New York, I think about what do people think about when they're walking around in the city? What is it that's important to them? And so one thing I noticed is they probably think about Starbucks because we have so many Starbucks. And I did some analysis that kind of spread around, and I learned that half of the people in Manhattan live within 4 blocks of a Starbucks, which is amazing. But I also was wondering who lives farthest from a Starbucks? Who is the person who lives the farthest in the entire city? So I was able to analyze that and found this address, and I didn't go and ring the doorbell and say, hi, did you know you live farthest from a Starbucks? They might get upset and kick me out. But you can start to analyze kind of silly things and understand. I also try to focus on a single idea. Often you see this data set and you say, it has so many columns. I don't know what to do. I have so much to look at. This data is so big, it has so many columns. Often I take maybe 1 or 2 columns and look for a story there. You look for an outlier. The most something, the least something. You count something. Sometimes just focus in and look for stories in individual columns, and ideas will start to come to you. Because when you sort those columns, you'll find something, or when you'll see something that's outstanding. So that's an example here where the city bike data, the bike share data had all sorts of things, but I just wanted to focus on gender. It was really one column with a male, female, and some counts and locations, but really, this was very simple analysis to do, so I didn't get carried away. And speaking of simple, when I tell people, I do data analysis and data science, they think that it looks something like this, I think. But I always tell them, no, it looks more like this, don't worry. It doesn't have to be all complicated. There are times when things are complicated, but there's so much you can do that's not complicated, right? So I'm not saying that there are certain things that need very sophisticated modeling, and I'm not saying those aren't important, but I'm saying that the world of things that doesn't need sophisticated modeling is huge. There's so much to discover with these 4 operators. So one thing I looked at is, in New York, I looked at the geography of the visitors to New York. And the way I found where visitors, I want to know where do our visitors go. And I used parking tickets to figure out where visitors go. Now, how did I do that? For every neighborhood, I looked at the percentage of parking tickets given to locals versus given to visitors. So you can tell for each neighborhood what percent of tickets are given to each, and then I mapped it, and sure enough found that as you get farther away from Manhattan, which is where most visitors go, and out to the edges of New York City, there are less people who are getting tickets from out of New York State. So these are visitors who are driving there from other states in the US. What was nice about that is I could profile each state in the US and see where their drivers get tickets. So I started to analyze and looked at New Jersey, who are coming in from the west side, usually to work in New York, and you can see in the data that they're all kind of getting their tickets in Manhattan. I can take Connecticut, which is to the north, and you can see that the parking tickets are coming in from the north. But my favorite is that you can take California. Now, we all know California is the coolest state in New York, and Brooklyn is the coolest part in New York. And it turns out that Californians get their tickets in Brooklyn. So the coolest people in the U.S. get their parking tickets in Williamsburg and Greenpoint in the most hip neighborhoods. So it's a way to quantify how cool people are. So lastly, explore the things that you know best. Many of you are experts in different things, and it gives you a context to look at the world through because you know your area. One thing that I know in New York is that it's very, very difficult to find a taxi in the afternoon. And it's a very strange New York problem. And here's what happens. if you go out at between 4 and 5, about the evening rush hour, you try to find a cab, it's very hard. And that's because they're doing what's the shift change. So in New York, most of the cabs run in 2 12-hour shifts, okay? One driver takes 12 hours, the other driver takes 12 hours. And for some reason, and I'll tell you the reason in a minute, everybody decides to shift change at the same time. And that time is right during the evening rush hour when they need the most cabs. So it's very strange. And if you were to look at, what I did is I plotted the dollars per minute that all the cabs were making in New York per minute. And you can see here during the evening rush, it plummets. And I showed that that was 3 to 4% of the revenue of the entire fleet of cabs was being lost during this bump here. So right around 3 in the afternoon, 4 in the afternoon, the blue line I added just to show what it might look like. But this is what the actual revenue is. And you know, the other shift change is in the middle of the night. It doesn't make much of a difference. But this shift change is happening. Now, this has been a problem in New York for 20, 30 years. You'll go back and you can hear different mayors trying to figure out how to solve this. So now this asks the question, why does everybody change at the same time? And why do they all change during one of the most busy times for the taxi? What is going on? It turns out that you can analyze the data and see. You see, what happens is there's only one time that I can split a cab with you and make it fair for both of us so that we each make the same amount of money, right? There's a magic time where the 12 hours previous and the 12 hours to the next are the same amount of demand. And so if you and I share a cab and we were to change keys at any other time, one of us would make more money. So everybody is locally optimizing to their pair of cab drivers, but for the city, it's a real problem, right? So what I did is I plotted the 12-hour revenue of the whole cab fleet. So the dark line is the previous amount of money you can make in 12 hours, and the light line is the next 12 hours. So where they intersect is where the previous 12 hours and the next 12 hours are the same amount of money. And that happens to fall right where the shift change is. So we're using math to understand human behavior in New York. It's an interesting problem. Then the city decided, well, what if we add a surcharge for rush hour? We're going to make it more expensive to ride a cab in the afternoon. Surely by throwing money, supply and demand, more cab drivers will come and step up. So they did this, but the problem was it actually created a new equilibrium point later into the day. And so now the crossing point was later into rush hour, not earlier. So the blue line would be the new proposed fare structure. Where they cross is later, not earlier. So this was done maybe 8, 9 years ago in New York, and to this day, it's a problem. It's very difficult to find. Now, in the land of the fights with Uber, they're looking for ways to make cabs better, and so they've revisited this. With open data, I was able to go and study this, and then got an invitation to go and speak with the commissioner of the Taxi and Limousine Commission in New York City to show these findings. The proposed solution is interesting. What happens is the only way to really make it fair would be to charge each driver a different amount of money depending on when they rent. So if you rent the car during a less demand time, then you pay less for the car. If you rent the car during a higher demand time, you pay more for the car. So then you end up making the same amount of money because one person's got the cheaper. The problem is they made laws that said you can only pay this much for your car. And so they can't make one more expensive and one cheaper because the New York City laws prevent this from happening. So we're stuck, and I think the legislator has to make some changes. And hopefully in the next year, maybe because of some help of open data, we'll see this problem solved. So this is the kind of innovation going on. And so in analysis, I say, look, connect with people's experiences. Keep things simple. I think that's maybe the key. People get carried away with lots of ideas, and simplicity is such an important aspect of it. And explore, the things you know best. And I'll talk lastly about how to make a real impact. So in New York, similar to what you have here, we have these Metro cards that allow us to ride the subway. However, ours are that you swipe them. We don't have the RFID, the contactless touch yes, sadly, which is so great here. It's so nice. We have to swipe, and you go to a machine to buy them. And when you buy them, you get a bonus. So if you spend a certain amount of money, they give you extra money. on top of it to try to get you to buy them in large increments. So now this bonus was, I believe, 5% for the last few years. And so you'd go and you'd buy a card, and it would be $10, and they put 5% bonus on. So you'd get, whatever the amount is, $10.50. Now, the thing about New York City is that all the subway rides, all the metro rides, cost the same amount of money. So no matter where you're going from and where you're going to, at least at the time, it was always $2.50. Always. $2.50 every ride. So why would you, when you went to buy your rides, you probably only want amounts that were in denominations of $2.50, right? You probably want a $10 card, but not an $11 card, because that last dollar you can't use. It's not like here where you can use it at stores. You can only use it to ride the subway. And what I noticed as I rode the subway, and I hit these buttons and I refilled my card, that I always had a leftover balance. I never had $0 ever. It was impossible. And it turns out that I started to ask around, and everyone else said, yeah. And I looked into it, and the subway line was making $10 to $20 million a year in leftover change that was unusable. So I did a mathematical proof that showed if you use their buttons, you can't ever get an empty card, never. And then the card expires. And you can transfer it if you remember, but most people don't, and they get a new one. And so all that money was going. So it seemed like something was wrong. So I wrote about it. And by the way, there was a $1 fee for that first card. So this would be $40, so $20 and $10. That gave you a 45 bonus, a 95 bonus. And so this one was particularly annoying because if you click that button, you got a card with $19.95. And you needed $20 to ride that last ride. So you were 5 cents short of your last ride. It was so annoying. I hated it. So I would always, I'm missing, and I have to go and miss the train because of that nickel, the 5 cents. Very frustrating. So I wrote about this, and the Metropolitan Transit Authority, which runs our subway, responded and said, these machines do not hold an infinite amount of change, and the denominations are suggested to ensure there is ample change to accommodate customers who pay with cash. That being said, we certainly look at this as part of the process involved in rolling out the next scheduled fare increase slated for next year. So they said, we'll look at it when we raise the prices, is what they said. I didn't think much would change, but they raised the prices this year, and I went down to the subway machines, and there was something amazing. There was a fourth button, okay? So that button, mathematically, with the bonus, is exactly 11 rides. All the other buttons have changed. So they added a fourth button for me to every machine in New York City so that you can get, now the red circle doesn't exist, so you wouldn't know that. Now this is still kind of silly because, like I said, every ride is the same amount. So you should be able to say, hey, I would like to ride the subway 4 times and buy 4 rides. But in New York, you can't. You can only say, I want to add this much money and get a random bonus, and I have no idea what's going on. So that's where we are today. I also looked at health inspection data. Now in New York, all of our restaurants have letter grades on the front. You can get an A, a B, or a C, or you can get shut down if it gets really bad. So the health inspectors come every year, and they inspect for the temperature, and I know there are inspections here as well. But that number you get turns into a letter grade, and then by law, you have to put that grade on your window. And everyone can see whether you're an A restaurant, a B restaurant, or a C restaurant. Now, if you're a fancy restaurant and you get that C, it's not good for your reputation. Maybe your customers will be nervous to come eat there because you've got such a low grade. And so the idea was to get people to make the restaurant safer by exposing through this A, B, and C. Now, an A was when you got 13 or less violation points. So 1 to 13. A B was 14 to 27 violation points. And a C was 28 or higher. Okay? So there were these cutoffs. Now, you'd think that the number of restaurants who got a 13 violation points would be similar to the number of restaurants who got 14, right? But one was the lowest A possible, and one was the highest B possible. And if you look, all the restaurants were getting the lowest A possible, and very few were getting the highest B possible. Now, why is that? They can't be so precise to know, I'm only going to make 13 mistakes instead of 14. It seems that the inspectors, they're human, they're trying to be nice, and when they go and inspect, they don't want to, it's like grade inflation. If you're a teacher and your student gets right on the border, maybe you give them that little boost. So you can really see the boost is quite big in New York, we're seeing this entire area should be collapsed down here. That's the natural progression, but our inspectors are not following that. It's kind of unfair because it means that the inspector, if they're having a good day, maybe you do better than if they're having a bad day. So I wrote about this, and in New York City, the Department of Health responded. And they said, inspectors are not instructed to offer leniency, just to cite what they see. The final score is based on the extent of the violation that the inspector observes. So basically, they didn't really say anything, sadly. But, however, if that data was released with some sort of ID on the inspector, you could make one of these charts for each inspector, and you would know who was doing it and who wasn't. Unfortunately, only they have that data, so I can't run that analysis. I hope to rerun this in a few years and see a much smoother chart if they're actually taking this seriously. But I don't know what is happening because I'm not within government. Another thing I noticed in New York was when you ride a taxi, you can pay by credit card. And when you pay by credit card, you're given the option to tip at the end. And you're given 3 options, default options. You can tip 20%, 25%, or 30%. Or you can tip other amount and type in any amount that you want, right? So it's 20%, 25, 30. Now this seems very high, but it was a negotiation with the cab drivers to get the credit card machines in. So they said, hey, let us put in credit card and we'll make the lowest tip 20%. And they said, okay, that seems like a good deal. So we have credit card payment machines. Now, when you go and you tip in a cab, the question is, what are you tipping on? Are you tipping on your ride? Are you tipping on your tolls? Are you tipping on taxes? Are you tipping on surcharges? It turned out that it depended on the manufacturer of the computer in the back of the cab. So half of the New York taxis, when you hit 20%, you were tipping on top of tolls and taxes. And the other half, which were created by another company, one was Creative Mobile Technologies, one was Verifone. The Verifone program cabs were only tipping on top of the fare and the surcharge. So the drivers of half the cabs in New York were making $400 more a year because of a software change. $400 a year per driver because they were getting tips on top of, and by the way, like 60 to 70% of New Yorkers hit those buttons. 45% use the 20% button. So most people use them and they just pay more without thinking. So this was, unfair. It created 2 kinds of taxis, some with a higher amount than others. So I wrote about this in the blog, and the Taxi and Limousine Commission responded. And they said, we appreciate the work that went into his analysis, and we're giving it a thorough read. So I didn't think anything would happen after that statement. But 2 weeks later, they reprogrammed half the cabs in New York City. The problem was they made them all more expensive. So it didn't go exactly as I planned. But at least now they're all the same. At least it's equitable, and at least the fleet, which is highly regulated, has things that they're doing the same thing. And I'll show you this last example. These are fire hydrants in New York City, but they're not just any fire hydrants. In New York, if you park within 20 or 15 feet of a fire hydrant with your car, you get a ticket. And that's a very expensive ticket. It's $160. So if you park within 15 feet, and there's no marking, you just have to know. So, no one carries measure tape around, but they could. So I mapped the fire hydrants in New York by the amount of dollars in parking tickets per year that they were generating for New York City. So each of these is a fire hydrant, and the bigger the circle, the more money was taking in for New York City in parking tickets. And I found 2 things. One, I found this Upper East Side in New York, this one neighborhood, the police were very, very aggressive, and they were ticketing like crazy for fire hydrants. But I found this other, which were these 2 hydrants in the Lower East Side, and they were making over $55,000 a year just being hydrants. Just sitting there, they were making $55,000 a year just being, and this seemed strange to me. What could be happening? So I went and I looked, and it turned out that there was a hydrant, but then there was a bike lane. And then after the bike lane was a parking spot. So the car said, I'm not really at the hydrant. The Department of Transportation painted a parking spot, but the police department disagreed. And they fought about it with tickets for 10 years. So this went on, and by the way, this is a picture from Google Street View, the Google Star, which caught a parking ticket on the windshield of the car. So if you were to go on to Google now, you'd see a parking ticket of the car there. So I wrote about this. The Department of Transportation said, hey, well, we have not received any complaints. We will review the roadway and make any appropriate alterations. And I waited, and a few weeks later, They repainted the spots, saving New Yorkers over $55,000 a year. Now these are small changes, right? These are very, very local changes. And these are just examples of things that could go. And I'm not saying that these are significant, but they're a sign. They're a sign that citizens can use data to help government maybe sometimes operate more efficiently and better. And what's so great about open data is it gives the opportunity for all of you to have a voice in government and help sort of drive change. Sometimes the change is extremely local. It's on your block, you know. I have a feeling about this. Sometimes it could be bigger. It could be helping route garbage trucks through the streets more efficiently to save the city money, or help predict where the next fire is going to be, right? There are big questions, there are small questions, but these are signs that there is room for citizens to participate using open data. And I hope that you've seen that with some of these examples, though they're small, are just the beginning of what open data can do when you use it. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Wellington, for his insight and knowledge. 我们谢谢 Dr. Ben Wellington 的分享。现在我们即将进行的是中场休息时间，下午的议程将分为2个场次进行座谈。在 A 会场将进行的座谈主题是世界新变局，人民有感的资料应用。在 B 会场将进行的座谈主题是开放起步走，开放资料之文化养成。开始时间为1点半，请各位来宾参考大会议程，届时前往您参加的会场。如果您还参加下午的场次，你可以自行保管你的同步翻译设备，继续使用。如果您即将离开会场，麻烦您交还至翻译耳机租借处，并记得取回您的证件。敬请各位来宾离开座位时，务必将物品随身携带，以防遗失。那么我们的午餐场地呢，要麻烦各位移驾至7楼，凭餐券领取餐盒，谢谢。The next session will be divided into 2 tracks and will be starting at 1:30. Please refer to the conference agenda for the location. The luncheon is at 7th floor. Please enjoy. Thank you.